Just a couple of things. First of all, let me say thank you. Let me say this is a wonderful beginning, and I hope that there's a replication across this country, because the problem exists in every single solitary state of the union. Let me say that there's no other vehicle better, more equipped, or more efficient than changing our society than that which comes from our faith-based communities. So our clergy members that are here, let me thank you. I just want you to grow. Grab your brothers and your sisters and grow, and figure out what our message is going to be and share it, because there is an incredible movement against righteousness, and there is a lot of evilness going on that we can only stop if we band together across this nation and do everything that we possibly can do, which is to march, to yell, to teach, to preach, and to vote. I'm not going to talk about voting, although you know that I think that one of the biggest problems we have with our criminal justice system in the state of New Jersey is that there are a lot of cronyism. There's a lot of cronyism between those who make their money off of incarcerating people and those who are in government and make the policies what they will be. Let me talk about a couple of things and just share with you that in 2008, when we started a series of hearings, we knew there were problems, but we had no idea how big and how bad. So we took these hearings across the state of New Jersey and had them in the evenings and on weekends so that we could hear from those who were incarcerated, those who were formerly incarcerated, those who had families of the incarcerated, those who provided services to the incarcerated, those like Gene Ross who cared about the incarcerated, and those who even represented government and dealt with them from a programmatic and a custodial perspective. We could have gone on and on and on and on and on, and as a result of our various hearings, we put together a package of legislation which consisted of about 50 bills that we tried to merge into about 10, and we succeeded in perhaps getting 3 or 4 actually passed, and I tell you, this administration is enforcing none of them. And this legislation was designed to deal with really 2 levels of, I think, the issue. Because I think this is a 3-level issue. It is the before. That's to keep people out of prison, and that's something that we haven't given enough a voice to, and we need to think about that as strategically as they think about putting them there. We need to think about how to stop that. Then there's what happens when you are there, and what happens when you come out of there. And so our hearings basically address the latter 2 issues. What happens when you're in there, what should happen when you're in there, and what happens when you leave. A number of pieces of legislation had to do with what we said was preparing individuals to come back into our society. How to become whole again. You needed to be able to work. You needed to have access to social services that had been arbitrarily and capriciously denied you because you had committed a certain type of crime. It made no sense. It was just another extension of the punishment. And then how to prepare you while you were there with skills and education and literacy, so that you could indeed come out and become part of the tax-paying component of our society, and not those that need to use the resources of the taxpayers. And we had tremendous feedback and involvement with work groups, and Gene was on one. And we framed the discussion in counting the cost, because we thought that if you don't see just the justice in all this bastard, if you don't see right versus wrong, then you will see the cost associated with incarcerating versus educating, and with reincarcerating instead of preparing for jobs. And we were successful in a number of areas, but like I said, the laws are on the books, but the laws are not being enforced. In fact, there are fewer programs, there are fewer reading programs, fewer literacy programs, fewer skills producing programs, fewer behavior modification programs. fewer expectations of you having a successful outcome when you leave. And they make it very difficult for families to stay connected on two levels. One is that if you're from Newark, they'll put you in a prison in South Jersey. It is difficult if you are poor and brown and black to get from Newark down to Cumberland County or Gloucester County, but that is what's happened. And the other area that makes it difficult for families to stay connected, even though all the research says if you stay connected with your loved one who is incarcerated, there is a greater chance of a successful outcome once you leave prison, and that is just trying to stay in touch with them by the telephone. The state of New Jersey has engaged in a contract with a provider, and for that contract, the state of New Jersey gets $1.75 on each call that is made, as well as a certain percentage of each call that is made. So a loved one reaching out to his or her family, it could cost them somewhere upward of $15 to have a 3-minute conversation. If you are poor, which you are primarily if you're in prison, and you're black and brown in prisons in New Jersey, your family has to make a decision. Can it accept that collect call, or does that money get used for rent or food or for some other vital?
And we have a petition to sign about that very problem.
You have a petition and I have a piece of legislation.
Right.
So together we ought to be able to make a change. Because that issue has come up again. We weren't successful in getting it through under the exiting Corzine administration. It's a real issue. It's a burden to families. We have legislation, but we need support from the outside. And I want to talk to you about support from the outside. Another issue that we encountered was that individuals who were ready, willing, and able to work once they exited the prison, because perhaps they went in ready, willing, and able to work, but for reasons other than that are legitimate, they found themselves incarcerated. When they came out and sought to get a job, they were confronted on the application with a box that says, have you been convicted of a crime? And in some instances, it might even say, have you been arrested? And once you check that box, your application went into the circular file. So right now, we're dealing with a lot of stakeholders, mostly small and large businesses, who are saying that they really understand this notion of ban the box. But they're very concerned about possible liability or vulnerability if perhaps they hire somebody who had committed a crime, who has a chance to get a promotion, but really shouldn't have a promotion because he had a criminal conviction. And what if he goes into a house and commits a crime in the house for which, that as part of his job, all that kind of what ifs. Well, those what ifs, they exist for each and every one of us also, because we can't predict the behavior. I think that this is very important that you exist and that you are willing to be a part of a movement, because there is a movement already, the mass incarceration movement, the movement to bring racism back up here, put it in our face, slap us in it, and we've got to be able to say that word. I just don't understand this notion of not calling it what it is. It is racism. It is racism, it is racism, it is classism, it is racism. And if you go into prisons, and I've gone into a few prisons, both as a legislator and unfortunately as a mother, and when I walked those halls, what I saw, 10 to 1, was an African American or Latino American. There's something wrong with a society that represents a population of 11% out there walking the streets and 70% or 80% in the prison. And you know what? Even Ray Charles sees the injustice in that. And so we should be able to do something about that. But we need outside pressure. We talk about the profiteering in the prison system. Not only is it very profitable, but even this extension of the prison to the halfway house, to the halfway back house, to the alternative, they don't work, because all they're concerned about is putting as many people in any square foot that they can get. And their programs consist of a bunch of affirmations on the wall and very little substance and very little accountability. And in many instances, you have individuals who are in these facilities who've committed non-violent crimes in these facilities with people who are violent. And we have lost people because of that. This has just got to stop. It's got to be enough. We've got to figure out, how do we talk to enough people to say that this is enough? And then we've got to manifest that it is enough in the actions that we do. We talk about the issue of nonviolent offenders in prison, mostly drug-related. I didn't know New Jersey had such a dubious distinction as it does with the incarceration of nonviolent offenders for low-level drug offenses. We have discussions on the state. One of the few things that I've been able to work with the governor on was this alternative to incarceration, these drug courts and residential programs. But where one of us in that partnership may legitimately think that this is the way to go, the person that puts the dollar where the problem is hasn't manifested that kind of commitment. So you might be addressing the needs of 100 when we need to be addressing the needs of 5,000. And we know that, and we know that. There was a time when I was a youngster, not that long ago, that when in between my summer program, summer school, going to school, I'd come back and work. I worked in a place called the State Home for Girls, and there was a commensurate State Home for Boys. The State Home for Girls is closed. The State Home for Boys is now in Jamesburg. We have eliminated all of those residential programs that allowed us to grab young people who were erring and going in the wrong direction, putting them in a safe environment, helping them to understand the correct behavior, helping them to learn to read, to write, to have value, to have self-value. We're going now from school to prison. There's no in-between, and we've got to stop it. It's enough. And the only way, and I'll be done, let me just see if I cut. The only way that we can stop this is that we have to show that there is enough will around the changes that need to be made. And the only way that we can do that is to be communicating and building our numbers. Signing our petitions, it's easier to sign them online now, right? You can just go to Facebook. My God, there's a petition for everything on Facebook. But at the end of the day, I need to thank you, because I sat here and I worked in this. This is part of my life's work, not because I'm a parent that experienced it. It was one of the first pieces of legislation I moved when I got into the legislature, was to restore voting rights. We do this because it is right, but just sitting there, just listening, just feeling, it is very depressing. But you know what's affirming? I believe there is a conspiracy, and I don't care how whacked out that sounds. There is an agreement to maintain, to destroy, and to grow an underclass. I don't know if that's what you need in order to justify your own flaws in life, or if that's just what you need in order to make $1. But I am telling you, being here was affirming. Listening to experiences and reflections, and even the reading from the book, just simply reminds me that just because I think that there's a conspiracy, there really is. So continue to do the work that you do, please. Grow it. Tell me where I can be and what I need to do. And talk to legislators. One last thing. Talk to legislators in districts where you don't have such good friends. Talk to legislators in districts that don't want prisons closed down because it represents employment for their communities. Show them that there are other ways to have vital communities. Thank you, and God bless.